We have a man.
Deborah, I feel like we're in a coven now. You're like, ooh. Well, good
What a way
morning.
to open, Deborah.
Yeah, it is Monday, August 25th. I'm Leslie Elliott Boyce. I'm joined by the usual cast of characters, Jenny Holland, Jennifer Friend, Deborah Knox, and Christine Stephen-Walk. And we have a guest with us today, Daniel Idfresne is how you pronounce your name. I believe you said Idfresne. It's a beautiful name. And Daniel is a writer and a spokesperson for Gen Z in some ways. You've been kind of on the forefront of talking about some of the political stuff that has been going on with young people and some of the trends that you're observing. So it's really great to meet you and have you here. And I hope I did not misstate your position in all of this, but I look forward to hearing your thoughts on all the crazy things in our world right now. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I wouldn't say I'm the chosen spokesperson for Gen Z, although there's a few things that I'm seeing on my end that I think that the media isn't really covering, or that we're only now just discovering, and I think I'm in a position to put that to light, because I'm not only talking about or referencing data, but I'm also just talking about my personal experience as a 21-year-old.
Yeah, well, it's great to be able to speak with you about this, because we all are. What a weird time it is, you know. I mean, one of the things somebody mentioned recently that I maybe it was in one of the comments on another video on this channel, something about how, just like with identity politics, where we start to attach a lot of meaning to categories and labels around sexuality or race or things like that, we're also tending to see that a lot with generations. So now there's this new way of talking where when we were all younger, you didn't talk about generations as much, but now it's really common to hear people talk about boomers and Gen Z and Gen X and have this kind of way of stratifying us by age. But I wonder how relevant that really is. Maybe it's very relevant, but maybe one of the many things
that's
we can
an interesting
talk about.
point to make. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting point to make. I would say it's not a one-to-one comparison with the identity politics that we see, where you're defining or grouping people by immutable characteristics, because generations are bounded by time and the shared experiences of by shared experiences, pretty much. And I think it's true, and I think you're more likely to, or it's better to, or not. You won't be as erroneous when stratifying based on that time and shared lived experience, especially since it seems like a lot has happened between, post World War II and now in the digital age, where things are radically different within only 56 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, I'm excited to talk with you because I'm running right over Deborah's introduction. Oh. And Deborah, do you want to go ahead and introduce Solid Ground?
A question.
Yeah.
So, our little blurb, our Solid Ground announcement. Solid Ground is a peer support community for anyone concerned about the imposition of critical social justice and or authoritarian measures such as medical mandates in their workplace, university, children's school, or community. We offer weekly online peer support groups in which members share ideas, thoughts, and support for how to navigate the impact of these ideologies and answer the question, where do we go from here? You can join our peer support group for $10 a month, and you can join our forum on locals for $5 a month. To find out more, you can visit us at the Solid Ground Substack for the peer support groups and Solid Ground Locals for the online forum. Please note that Solid Ground does not provide psychotherapy or legal advice, and nothing we do should be construed as such.
Awesome. Thanks, Deborah. So you had a question that you were about to launch into, Deborah.
Yeah, now, of course, I forgot it. So please, everyone else, go ahead.
I have one more, if you don't mind. This is something I've thought a lot about. One of the reasons why I think that there's so much dissociation and struggling, reaching for identity labels in young people right now. One of the things that I've thought is that this is a byproduct of our increasing atomization at least in the United States. We're really a nomadic culture that ends up uprooting and going in different directions far away from extended family support systems. So we're more and more isolated in that way. And then at the same time, we've been doing so much age stratification we've got smaller family sizes. So you've got people having just maybe 2 kids, maybe 1. And they're not being raised with a bunch of older siblings or younger siblings and cousins around. So our kids are then sent to school where their only experience is with other people of their same age, which could allow for a lot more drift and a lot more identification with that particular stratified age group. And so I wonder to what extent that is actually making it more relevant for us to talk in terms of generations in this way. And does anybody have any thoughts on that, Daniel?
I think you're hitting the nail on the head there. It's like what you said, and not only with sort of the amount of children people are having within a family unit, but we're now not necessarily living with our aunts and uncles and extended family within one place, which also diminishes household sizes. And to your point, a lot of the time within Gen Z, we would stratify different parts of Gen Z, right? And so if you scroll through Instagram or TikTok and you're watching videos, right, there's, sometimes there are videos that group, let's say like the 99s to the 04s, right? And that's like the group who had a childhood without technology, and then around maybe 6th or 7th grade really started getting phones versus like older Gen Z and younger Gen Z. So, and with school that amplifies it as well, like you're going to school with your year. Like all of my closest friends are 04s just like me.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I think Gen Z is probably can make a claim to be the most ahistorical, unprecedented life experience for young people, even more so than millennials, even more so than Gen X, and even more so than boomers, who all have some claim to that. But I don't think anyone in the history of mankind has grown up like Gen Z has grown up. On the whole, even within those distinctions between young and old, and even in just no matter where you are in the United States or even the Western world in general, actually, I think that blanket statement could hold up to a ton of scrutiny, because children have never been raised with the kind of culture that you guys were raised in, to my knowledge, anyway.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I mean, simply on the technology front, what Gen Z and now Gen Alpha are going to waters that we're wading through have never been seen before. And, there's more and more evidence, at least with technology. We're seeing some of the personality shifts from chronic use of phones and laptops and whatnot. And then you also have an unraveling of American culture that is unique because of the freedom of association aspect, the association aspect of American culture, where the family is the first political unit, and usually you're really close friends not only with your siblings but also extended family as well, and you would also volunteer somewhere, and you would go to church somewhere and have communities there. And we're seeing like a macro disintegration of American values via the left, we're seeing the atomization through technology, and nobody's associating anymore in a way. There's less and less associations, and as a Gen Zer, if you have those communities, you are in a way better position than most of your generation, in my opinion.
What have you noticed on campus? I know you've gotten involved in a fraternity, and so there's this way that there is like this building of community. Have you been finding, like, amongst your peers, are people joining things where they come together physically in person? Or are they still sort of the post-COVID tendency to isolate in your room situation? have they gotten over that? What's happening in terms of that sort of coming together in communities in your particular college?
Well, in my opinion, I think COVID was simply an amplifier for ills that were already present. And that may not be the case for those who are younger than me, who spent more of their formative years during the pandemic. And we have to sort of wait and see how they end up. Those who are younger than me, past '04, who spent like middle school and the beginning of high school during the pandemic. But for at least I would say my year and up, those we were already experiencing problems with technology, more neuroticism. You're less likely to actually build those social skills. And then COVID came in and pretty much made everything worse. On campus, there are associations, there are communities, there are clubs that you can join. Although I would say that more than now than ever, it seems like writ large, people tend to fare by themselves or have very small friend groups. There's also I have to look out for myself for boundaries, overcorrection, I would say, in my generation, where if your boundaries are crossed, or you have to put yourself first, and giving up something that you probably want for because you're friends with somebody and you want to show that you appreciate them or you're grateful for them, or you just want to show and do that. And by doing that, you're sacrificing something in order to show that appreciation. My generation is doing that less and less. And so, again, like on paper, there are clubs, there are organizations and whatnot. But to those who will point to that, I will say, well, even in high school, again, before the pandemic, there are friend groups on paper, but when you walk into the lunchroom, all four of them are sitting together, yes, but are scrolling on their phones and maybe showing each other the occasional meme, not actually exercising the social muscles or actually sacrificing something. And it doesn't have to be a big sacrifice, but sacrificing an event that you wanted to go because it's your friend's birthday and you have to go to that birthday event because it's their birthday, and so I guess to wrap it up, I'm sort of going off the deep end, but again, when it comes to the associations, the organizations are there, but I see a rot in them, as demonstrated by, again, the loss of like social muscle that my generation has endured.
Yeah, thank you so much for explaining that. I think that's really interesting what you're pointing to there. Like, even though people were together more physically, the quality of that had really eroded because of the way that we're all being sucked into our own individual entertainment. You picture the family all sitting around watching a different show on their thing at night instead of watching the same show, which you could say that already is a decline in terms of quality time spent together. But one of the things I'm wondering is, and this might be a little bit of a departure, but one of the statistics we keep seeing is that young men are starting to skew a little bit more conservative. Young women are still skewing more heavily liberal. And I don't know if those are great. I guess I should say progressive because it's really a different thing. But I'm wondering, what's been your experience with that as a young man, and within your friend groups? Do you believe those statistics are accurate, and how do you see the relationships between men and women in your age group?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say there's a little bit of bias, at least in my personal experience, because I am in Greek life at Syracuse University, and it seems to be that, at least in Greek life across the country, not just here in Syracuse, the median guy actually skews more right. So in Greek life, a guy in Greek life will skew more right than the already more conservative turning median guy in the general population.
Okay.
Right? But I do see it around me, and it's not a political first thing. It's not necessarily guys sitting down reading the policy platforms of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, or reading the policy platform of Zohran Mamdani and saying, well, I don't agree with that. I think it's an error first, understanding that they've been rejected by the left, especially white young white men who are the ultimate oppressor in the oppressionomics that we see in the more authoritarian leftist types. And then there's a growing culture that has sort of conservative, right wing undertones that guys are opting into instead because there is an alternative for growth and improvement and not necessarily a promise, but some hope that they could actually apply themselves for a better future, right? And the left has sort of shot themselves in the foot. When you write articles like it's working out right wing, you're sort of just seeding that ground. And I think the problem is if you're really into that cultural Marxist left circle, you actually don't understand that guys want to start working out and going to the gym, right? Not necessarily as a right wing pursuit, but you're just naturally geared to working out, whether via a friend who worked out before you and you're just like, man, like he has like cool muscles, I want to, be like him. Every young guy has an experience, especially if you like start off like on a skinnier end, can tell you about their like class crush holding up their wrists and like commenting on how like small they are and then wanting to go to the gym to like impress girls, right? Like these aren't like those attitudes aren't like conservative. They're just natural to being a young guy. But then the left in its, I guess, hive mind views that as right wing because it doesn't fit into the gender fluidity worldview, for example.
That's interesting. I think, Jenny, you were going to say something, weren't you? I cut in earlier.
I was going to ask a question about parenting, but I think you're right. I think that I'm very happy to see that, it's apparent to more than just people like us, like old ladies like us, that articles like is working out far right or whatever. I'm very happy to see that young men aren't falling for it. And I mean, I kind of knew they weren't anyway, but it's always nice to have that like confirmed. But a couple of people in the comments, and I thought of this as well earlier, when you're talking about the sort of lack of social skills in people your age, do you think that's down to parenting as well as sort of COVID, lockdowns, and technology? Could it be both?
Maybe. I'm not a parent, and I'm not a parenting expert, I guess, although a parenting expert would just be a parent.
Yes.
I say that right. Because I saw this. I say that because I saw this clip on ABC News. Didn't even watch it. I saw parenting expert, and I was just like, what? You need an expert for literally everything these days. But I think that maybe parenting has something to do with it. Maybe because it's helicopter parenting and not allowing kids to go out and get a job or to just hang out with friends until it's time to come home for dinner and whatnot. But I don't know. I feel like in some ways my parents were helicopter parents. They're immigrants from another country. They really prioritize education. And so I was forbidden from even playing. I was forbidden from playing sports for the longest time until like I finally convinced them that, like sports isn't gonna make my grades worse. It's just a fun thing to do. But that's just like I guess a window into my parents' parenting style. And even so, I feel as though my social I take the time out of my day to actually exercise those social skills. Being in Greek life, a social setting, helps with that a lot. So I think it's more so the technology than it is to parenting. I remember talking to Deborah actually during our coffee chat, talking about the fact that technology has cut the unskippable cutscenes, or what we once thought were unskippable cutscenes. Doing your groceries and then talking to the person behind the cash register, the cashier, asking them how their day was, and small conversation like that. Stepping out of your house instead of ordering DoorDash, walking to the local restaurant or the local store and speaking with the people there. Um, even even actually learning about somebody for the first time, your own Gen Z peer, instead of stalking them on social media to figure out how much you can after meeting them, you could just ask, right? You could just ask about their life and whatnot. And that by doing things like that, you're exercising that muscle, and you're just getting better at just not only being an interesting person yourself, because you realize as you talk to people, our lives, the human experience is all about stories, how to tell stories, being an interesting person and having cool stories yourself to tell people, and how to compliment people and make them feel wanted and welcome. But also, you will learn that so many other people have so many things to offer, because their life is something you're completely unaware of, because you're so focused on what you're doing on a day to day, and it's just so enriching to like listen to other people's stories. This has been lost because of technology, because of social media, because of DoorDash, because of uh, because it's easier, again, to order food than to walk out and to talk to somebody at a local restaurant, and it's a negative feedback loop, right? So the technology, like in and of itself, isn't bad. Like it has uses. Like I told Deborah, I remember in our chat, like if you're genuinely a busy person and you have work all day, then you would probably order out than actually step out and get food. But the but it's we've with my generation, we've been using it chronically, right? So it's not like we're going on social media, posting what we did for the day and then turning it off and then going to get dinner with friends. It's we're spending 8-9 hours a day on social media, on our phones. And so it just consumes our entire life, and it becomes this negative feedback loop where you become more neurotic, and you are losing, like, the charismatic skills you would need to command a room. And at least as a young guy, you know, I think all my friends are decently charismatic. We select for that. Fraternities tend to select for that. But if you're a young guy who, let's say, you want to have a girlfriend, let's say, we could talk about the dating stats and whatnot with Gen Z. Well, you're not going to jump all the way to 100 and try to flirt with somebody you like, because I mean that's like conversation final boss, at least as for a young boss. Yeah, like it's like engagement. Yeah, it's engagement final boss. That and maybe a job. The ABCs is holding a conversation with your neighbor, with your with an acquaintance, with the lady at the front desk, and then you can conquer the final dragon or whatever of talking to somebody that you like, because it is nerve-wracking.
Scary.
Yeah, you wouldn't be human if you didn't think it was nerve-wracking, because we have emotions and that's how we are. But you have to build up to it, just like you progressive overload at the gym.
I just wanted to comment on that, because I mean, it's so eye-opening to hear everything you're talking about. I was working with, I guess, the Gen Z population at some point. I'm a therapist, and the rates of depression and anxiety were through the roof. And I felt that a lot of it was connected to this over-obsession with social media, and that they were living their lives completely in this electronic world, in this bubble, that they were not in touch with or communicating organically with other kids, other youngsters that are their age. So the basic social skills of being able to say hi to somebody was totally dampened. And that kind of led to a mental health problem eventually, where then there was so much isolation and then so much anxiety, and then believing that everything you read on somebody's social media page must be exactly the truth, and seeing how everybody's lives are better than yours. I mean, all these kinds of things contributed to this sort of mental health crisis. And what you're talking about, I think, would have done so much good, or does do a lot of good to avoid, having those kinds of mental health issues. But that was, I think, staggering. I mean, the suicide rates are so much higher now than they were. And, it's so much of the time we would sit and talk colleague to colleague about this being an issue with, the lack of connection as one issue, perhaps, is the lack of authentic human face-to-face connection as being an issue, and what sort of rattled our brains on what we would do, what to even offer about that, because it was so widespread through the culture. So it's really a breath of fresh air to kind of hear you talking about how that's changing, or how you've been able to make that change in the environment that you're in now.
Yeah, and usually it will come naturally as you're a young person growing up. You have your family that you communicate with. Your family probably goes to a church, volunteers, et cetera, and you would naturally find yourself in positions where you have to speak to other people and, again, exercise those social skills. But in the age of technology now, you have to be the word is at the tip of my tongue. You have to seek out those opportunities, right? You have to say, okay, I don't want to go on let me put down my phone and let me actually go have fun, communicate, do something that involves other people. And a lot of people aren't making that connection. They're just sort of like, in that sort of mode where you're just consuming technology, consuming social media, consuming technology, et cetera, without actually taking a step back and saying, who have I talked to today? Have I had a conversation today? Et cetera. And I would say that social media is definitely a part of it. But I think the high depression rates is an amalgamation of what you said with chronic social media use, being politically disillusioned, depending on what your immutable characteristics are and what side you have sympathies for, which has a worldview that is pessimistic in nature, especially if you subscribe to more of the authoritarian left oppressionomics model. I would say those three things are the main three. Social media comparison / chronic use. I would say like the identity politics, and then just like a pessimistic worldview. I think I will also say this too, like culturally too. And then I think this is the fault of the cultural Marxist left, the disintegration of American culture that will give you avenues to rectify the problems of like social media, for example, and the pessimistic worldview the pessimistic oppressionomics worldview, right? Because American culture is unique in a sense of you can find meaning in so many different levels of American society, whether it would be, and the more local, the better, right? There's a reason why even when we're in a foreign country, we refer to ourselves by the states we're from and not the country as a whole, for example, right? Because American culture is like uniquely situated in a way where we're built from the ground up as like the family as the first, not only political, but cultural unit. And then the church, if you attend, volunteering organizations, like Greek life, for example, although, it's I guess culturally it's not, on paper it's philanthropic, but philanthropic, yes. Sorry. And we do like philanthropy events, but then, another part of Greek life, which is what it's more known for, is the nightlife and the party life and the mixers between, young people. Like there's so much to choose from, in American culture, and you can choose from more locally, but the problem is, the cultural left has deemed everything Americana completely evil, and oppressive because of the white man, apparently. So we can't. So Gen Z is not allowed to inherit that from their parents and their grandparents.
Daniel, there's a question here I think is a good one. Clump, that's a funny name, but asks, what is your strategy for dealing with people of irreconcilable worldviews? And I guess I would even broaden that out to say the polarization that we see everywhere. Like right now, you've got people whose family members don't talk to them anymore because they voted wrong, or, you know, people who are just, you know, unable to get past these political hot points to just remember that they have a human relationship that has more to do with life than politics. But with young people, like in your college and your high school, what did you see, and how do you see people, how do you personally, and how do you see people dealing with those kinds of polarizing topics and divergent worldviews?
It's unfortunate because those who firmly disagree with my worldview and my politics, and not just mine, but moderates, you know, classical liberals, old guard Democrats, center right, and full blown conservatives. We actually inhabit, you know, the classical, for the most part, the classical liberal perspective and whatnot, where the political isn't personal in the way that the cultural Marxist left sees it. And because the cultural Marxists, those who have who espouse that worldview, believe that A, the personal is political, and B, oppressionomics. So if you espouse politics that are against that are expressing violence against and it doesn't have to be physical, right? It could be rhetorical, and we can go into like postmodernism and whatnot when it comes to that. But rhetorical or physical, whatever, violence against my oppressed group, then you are actually attacking me for not believing in free markets, for believing in free markets, for believing in free expression, free association, American culture, and stuff like that. So it's really unfortunate. I feel like as a young person, adopting this worldview as a young person has been beneficial to me because I've been able to curate my friend groups. Like I'm only like 1/5, 1/4, whatever through my life. I've only just begun, and so I'm in a position where I can look for friends who don't necessarily agree with me on 100% of everything, but aren't subscribed to that kind of worldview, because I think that worldview is just damaging, and you shouldn't really have that around in your personal life, in your personal capacity at all anyway, because it's so self-defeating, it's so pessimistic, you don't want it to rub off you. That doesn't mean learn about it, and it doesn't mean don't study it so you can understand how to, strongman it and best refute it. I'm just saying that it could get exhausting to actually befriend people who believe you're attacking them just because you are Lockean, for example. So I guess I'm in a place of privilege to say so. The only time I've really experienced real pushback was in high school when I first published that piece in the Free Press. I'm 17 and I'm immunized from woke politics, because my friend groups in high school were already solidified by then, right? So I did not have that privilege in that moment. Part of it, I think you just have to, there will be people who will come up despite that and will express support for you. And at some point you just have to, if they're a friend, you may have to just leave them behind. Try to convince them, but at some point you can't really help them. And that's what, or you have to leave them to their own devices and see if they can figure it out on their own. Or maybe engage in some Socratic questioning if they're the inquisitive type, because some are, and they will amend their positions, and you're opening the door for them to change politically, and not just politically, philosophically as well. But for the most part, if you don't want the headache and you're friends with people and you're just, I guess, you're friends with you may have to leave them behind. All right. And that's what I did with a lot of my friends at Brooklyn Tech when I released that piece. Again, I was in a privileged position. I was in a privileged position again because it was just senior year of high school. And all I had to do was just wait out my last year of high school. And then I went into college, not looking for conservative friends, but looking for friends who are ambitious, who will go out and talk to people, who will hit the gym, et cetera, et cetera. So, I sorry for the non-answer, I guess. Recounting my own personal experience, I feel like I can't give that same experience or that same advice to other people. As for your family, if a family member is espousing more the cultural Marxist nonsense, I would, again, it's harder than, I guess, abandoning a friend. But even no, I would, it depends on the friend, right? Even the Bible says some friends are, better than family. I'm paraphrasing a verse, but I would say that, again, I guess here's the best advice I could give. If you can't change your mind and you'll sense it out, it's best to leave it alone. But if you think that they could be not steered to, a very conservative position, but at least a discerning, let's say a discerning citizen who's concerned about the cultural left. Socratic questioning, right? I would say that's the first thing. If they say something or they reacted to a news story, ask them why, how, why do you believe that? Do you think the news source has an interest in reporting this? Why do you think the worldview is so simplistic? Why are you framing it this way? And give me some examples of why, right? And generally be curious. And then I would say B, just be a good person. There are people in my life who, again, don't agree with me politically, but, people may tell them, hey, like, how are you friends with Daniel? Like, Daniel's a fascist or he's like racist or whatever. And in their mind, I mean, they'll deal with it, but in their mind, they're thinking that, wait, this person is generally a good person, right? How can he be a fascist, right? Well, any reasonable, discerning person, if you're a good person, will think that.
Mm-hmm. Not to cut you off, but you touched on something that I think is really interesting, and that's some of the biggest ways that we've seen, at least in the education system, use identity politics to divide people is through race and sex and sexuality. And I wonder, do you see what are the trends you see right now with regard to relationships between people of different racial backgrounds, and is it as bad as we've all been told? Or do you see like Gen Z starting to reject some of those reductive stereotypes? And also with sex and sexuality, what do you see? Do you see that being a really big dividing line? There's the queer theory kind of stuff, and then there's just like the really ultra progressive sexuality that we've seen that's anti-heterosexual and anti-monogamy. Do you see people starting to adopt something that's more traditional, or values that are a little bit more traditional, or do you see it just continuing on in that progressive, like pro everything but heterosexual monogamy?
I think for the most part, most of Gen Z, again, race isn't. I don't think, for the most part, the reductive rhetoric on race has made race relations, at least in younger generations in America, worse, right? I have white friends, Hispanic friends, friends of all races. Just because I may be higher on the oppressionomics ladder according to the racial postmodernists, the intersectionality crowd, they don't bear resentment towards me, again, because I don't browbeat them with it, right? So there's no reason for them to feel resentment towards me, right? Because I'm not playing the oppressionomics game. I'm just trying to be as best of a person I could be in my community. And so as long as individuals continue to do that, I don't think the progressive left will make race relations worse. But I will say there is a contingent of the right, the racialist right, that is starting to make that case. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to defeat both sides, the racialists on the left, because they are racialists, and the racialists on the right, who are rising up in opposition to the left.
It's a pendulum swing.
Yeah, it's a pendulum swing. But for the most part, every day. But don't let X don't let X fool you. You know, don't. It may seem that this is a very, very big growing type of rightist, but I don't see it in my day-to-day life. I don't see people espousing those types of, at least with my more right-wing friends, I don't see them espousing that type of worldview. As for sexuality, I do see sort of I think people are starting to get tired of it. I do see more of a pushback in that department than in the race department. And I think it's because the push of the radical LGBTQ crowd has been it's more polarizing and it's more significant in ways than the racialist left making their oppression arguments, right? Because because it's thrown in our face more in a way. I feel like the left has almost abandoned race in a way, right? Like I feel like 10 years, and I see this with the New York City mayoral race, 10 years ago, gerrymandering was a big thing, right? I think one of like the crown jewels of like leftist politics, especially urban leftist politics, right? But the left has sort of abandoned race post George Floyd because of I feel as though a lot of younger Black Americans are starting to actually turn Republican, Black men in particular, but also because I lost my train of thought there. Wow, but I would say the LGBTQ crowd is way more consequential in their policy, way more in your face, and people are way more tired of it in a way, right? Like, especially when it comes to children, right? Children
so it's more
like
actively polarizing right now.
Yes, than the race thing. People are starting to buy less of the race thing. Again, the post-civil rights, America is still very much alive today. Not the intersectionality America, but again, like post-CRM, whereas, treat people by the content of the character, not by the color of their skin. And for the most part, at least when it comes to gay rights, I think that line of argument for at least ordinary Americans extends to that as well. But again, freedom of association is a big thing in America, right? And it seems that this crowd is forcing everybody to associate, toe the line, and not congratulate, but support their cause to a fault, right? And so to wrap it up, I think the reason why the radical queer theory and what we're seeing on the streets, it's so tiring to ordinary Americans, and I'm speaking on behalf of like the people around me in a way, where I hear their like opinions about it. The LGBTQ crowd is firmly punching at very American ideals of freedom of association and American Puritan culture of our children should not be learning anything sex related in schools, right? These are categorical in the American psyche, in my opinion, right? I get to freely associate with whoever I want, be friends with whoever I want, organize however I want to, and I don't need to support your cause if I don't want to, and American Puritan culture.
That's really interesting. One quick thing. My mother used to teach at where you went to high school. My mother used to teach at Brooklyn Tech.
Oh, Brooklyn Tech. Oh, that's awesome. What did she teach?
Yeah, like around the time you were born. She taught French. She taught French there for, I don't know, I want to say until about 2009. So you were just a little thing, but you weren't you weren't a student of hers. But yeah, it's a great school. For anyone who doesn't know, it's a public school that you have to test into. It's one of like the top 3 public high schools in New York. Can we talk about Mandami for a minute? Does anyone mind if we go in that direction?
No, go ahead.
Because he has been very. I mean, obviously, from a political perspective, like this group would find him inconsistent in multiple ways. But to me, what you're saying there about sort of the gay fatigue, people being tired of the TQIA, as someone said in the comments. But Mandami seems to be really doubling down on that. Isn't he? I mean, didn't he tweet like queer liberation means defund the police or something like that? I mean, and isn't he on the record? Oh yes, the trans sanctuary cities. That's one of his policy platforms.
Thanks.
Is to offer free like accommodation and trans surgeries to children from anywhere in the country. So that's literally their platform. As far because I listened to a Democratic Socialists of America member yesterday. Well, I was listening to it yesterday. Talk about this, and that is he was like I was the one who brought this to Mandami and said you have to support this. We will open our doors as a city to not just fund trans healthcare for minors, but also put them up in hotels while they're getting the treatment and stuff like that.
Oh my gosh.
Obviously New York is a special case, but do you see that possibly backfiring on him? Because the interesting thing about Mandami was that in every district that wasn't professional managerial class amongst Democratic registered voters, he did not do well.
Oh yeah,
like
yeah,
among
100%.
The only places he did well were like the Park Slope, Bushwick, Upper East Side, blah 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 blah.
Actually, not the Upper East Side, believe it or not. The Upper East Side voted
Right.
for Cuomo, but it
Right,
still
right,
gives
right.
credence to that argument of it's the newly settled, because these are gentrified neighborhoods: Park Slope, Williamsburg, Bushwick, newly settled professional class in New York who are voting for Mamdani, as opposed to what I call the old guard New Yorker, whether it's old money, Great Gatsby style Upper East Side or low income Brownsville. They both voted the same way in the primary for Cuomo, and that's very telling of the crossroads where New York City is right now, right? We're at a crossroads
And the Democratic Party, the entire progressive Democratic movement across the United States and across,
which is
I would
why
say,
the mayoral
UK.
election is getting so much national attention, because New York City, what we're seeing in New York City will dictate, let's say, like the Democrat midterm platform and the national politics platform, especially if DSA is able to, take the seat of Hakeem Jeffries, for example, who is my representative, by the way. Believe it or not, I actually met him once during high school. He's a pretty calm guy, even though I don't really agree with him on a lot of his politics. But you're right. I don't think that Mamdani's platform on giving on trans healthcare, I don't think that's the straw that will break the camel's back. But there's also a reason why that's not front and foremost on its platform. It's because that New Yorkers care about affordability. That's what matters most to them. But what most New Yorkers who don't really know much about Mamdani, they just know that he's like gaining a lot of clout right now, and he has a great smile and he's charismatic. Is all they hear is the affordability part, and they don't realize that with the left, all of everything from affordability, quasi-socialist, if not pretty much socialist policies, the LGBTQ platform, the immigration, a reductive immigration platform, they all follow that same Marxist blueprint. So it's a package deal, right? It's you sign on a dotted line because in the beginning of the terms of use, There's the, oh, I'm going to make this city more affordable, but then you forgot to read the fine print, and this whole wish list of cultural Marxist DSA type goals that Mamdani is either directly trying to implement or opening up the door to imposing, or even finishing from de Blasio's progressive ruin of the city while he was mayor. And so, to the point that you were making earlier, I don't think it's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. I think what's important is that the rest of New York steps up and say, okay, Mamdani may be young. He's 33 years old. I think if he gets elected in November, he'll tie for youngest mayor ever mayor in New York City. But that's where it ends. That's where the novelty ends. The social media campaign and his age. His policies have been tried, right? We know historically it's been tried in other states. It's been tried by de Blasio. It's been tried by New York City itself, and it's failed, and it's made New York City less affordable. Like when we're talking about rent freezes, right? De Blasio did it, and now a few years later, all the prices are sky high. Oh, I wonder what could have caused that, right? Kansas tried the city-owned grocery stores. The shelves are barren, right? We know it doesn't work. And side note to that, Zoran really boiled my blood when he said, "Oh, it's just a pilot program with C'est la vie." It's like, no, like, and that's his cavalier attitude about our taxpayer dollars says everything you need to know about his crowd and how he would govern New York City, which is already not in a great financial place right now, right? If he's so cavalier, like $60 million could change somebody's life, right? And not only that, right? When you use our tax dollars, it's not, oh, c'est la vie, like, let's see if this works. It's, I put my blood, sweat, and tears, my labor, my time into receiving payment or receiving value in exchange for that. It's not c'est la vie, it's this better work. And I think that can sum up a lot of the attitude of Mamdani and his policies. You know,
all right. Thank you guys so much for bearing with us. We had a little technical issue with the platform that we're using to stream, and I cut the stream, and this will look a little bit more seamless in the end. But we lost Jenny in the meantime. She had to run. Daniel, I just wanted to say we have really enjoyed speaking with you. I'm speaking for everybody here. Like you said, you're not the representative for Gen Z. I'm not the representative for this group either, but I think I can speak for us all when I say we've really enjoyed having you. I certainly have. And in closing, could you tell people where they can find your work if they want to either contact you or read what you've been doing or watch what you've been putting out there?
Well, yeah, you can. I've had fun talking to you guys as well. It's fun dissecting ideas and actually walking through why things are with Gen Z rather than clipping sound bites, essentially, when it comes to traditional cable news or a social media video. So I really appreciated this. I would, if you would like to read my work, you can find me on X. It's Daniel Idfresne. At Daniel Idfresne. You can also find me on Instagram, same handle, at Daniel Idfresne, last name ID, Fresne. You can find me on TikTok. I just started it. I tried to stay away from TikTok, unlike all my other friends. But now I'm on it mainly for professional reasons. So you can follow me on TikTok, Daniel.Idfresne. And I work with young voices. And so just keep an eye out, especially on my Twitter. I usually post a thread with every single new piece that I publish.
Awesome.
And you've got a lot of pieces on RealClearPolitics too. I know you've got pieces everywhere, right? But that's a place where you've published quite a bit. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the bulk majority of my New York City election coverage has been in RealClearPolitics. So if you're a RealClearPolitics reader, keep a lookout for my name. If it's New York City related, then it's probably me.
Well, I'm really impressed with how well-informed and thoughtful and nuanced your perspectives are on all these topics, and just really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. Thanks so much, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Nice meeting you.
It's a pleasure.